The morning sun rose slowly over the city of Baghdad in April 2003, casting a dusty orange glow over streets that had once been tightly controlled by the regime of Saddam Hussein. For decades, the Iraqi capital had lived under the shadow of a powerful leader whose authority seemed unshakable. His portrait hung from government buildings, his statues towered over public squares, and his name echoed through speeches, propaganda broadcasts, and school textbooks. But now, everything was changing. The thunder of armored vehicles echoed through the streets as coalition forces advanced deeper into the city during the early days of the Iraq War. Tanks rolled past abandoned checkpoints, helicopters circled above the skyline, and smoke rose from buildings damaged during the intense fighting. For the people of Baghdad, it was a moment filled with uncertainty. Some watched from their windows in silence, unsure of what the future would bring. Others cautiously stepped into the streets, witnessing the collapse of a government that had ruled their lives for generations. Saddam Hussein had once appeared untouchable. Since rising to power in 1979, he had ruled Iraq with absolute authority. Through a powerful network of intelligence agencies, loyal military commanders, and the political machinery of the Ba'ath Party, Saddam had built a regime that tolerated no opposition. Those who challenged him often disappeared. Entire communities feared the reach of his security forces, which operated in secrecy and brutality. Political rivals were imprisoned, dissidents were silenced, loyalty was rewarded, while betrayal was punished without mercy. For years, Saddam had projected the image of strength and defiance. Even during the devastating conflict known as the Gulf War in 1991, he remained in power despite international pressure and economic sanctions imposed by the United Nations. To his supporters, he was a symbol of Iraqi resistance. To his enemies, he was one of the most dangerous leaders in the world. But by early 2003, tensions between Iraq and the United States had reached a breaking point. The administration of George W. Bush accused Saddam Hussein of possessing weapons of mass destruction and supporting terrorist organizations, claims that became the justification for military intervention. In March 2003, the invasion began. Coalition forces, led by the United States and supported by allies including the United Kingdom, launched a massive campaign aimed at removing Saddam Hussein from power. The operation moved faster than many analysts had expected. Within weeks, Iraqi military defenses began collapsing across the country. Cities fell one after another as coalition forces advanced toward Baghdad. Then came one of the most symbolic moments of the war. On April 9, 2003, crowds gathered in Firdos Square in central Baghdad. In the middle of the square stood a massive statue of Saddam Hussein, towering high above the crowd. For years, it had served as a powerful reminder of his authority. But that day, something extraordinary happened. With the help of an American armored vehicle, protesters wrapped cables around the statue and began pulling. Slowly, the massive monument tilted. Then, with a loud crash, the statue of Saddam Hussein collapsed to the ground. The scene was broadcast around the world. For many watching on television, it looked like the end of Saddam Hussein's rule. The image of his fallen statue became a powerful symbol of the regime's collapse. Yet, even as celebrations spread across parts of the city, a crucial question remained unanswered. Where was Saddam Hussein? Despite the fall of Baghdad, the Iraqi leader had vanished. In the final days before the city was captured, Saddam had reportedly been seen moving between locations, meeting with loyalists and issuing orders. But after coalition forces entered the capital, his trail suddenly went cold. No one knew where he had gone. Some intelligence officials believed he might have fled the country, possibly escaping across the border into neighboring nations such as Syria. Others suspected he had gone into hiding somewhere inside Iraq. Rumors spread quickly. Some claimed he was hiding in underground bunkers. Others believed he had disguised himself and blended into the civilian population. Meanwhile, coalition forces began uncovering the remnants of Saddam's vast government network. Former ministers, military officers, and intelligence agents were being captured across the country. To help identify the most wanted figures of the former regime, the U.S. military created an unusual tool. It was a deck of playing cards. Each card featured the face of a key leader from Saddam's government. Soldiers carried the cards as a quick reference guide during raids and patrols. And at the top of the deck was the most important target of all, the Ace of Spades, Saddam Hussein. Finding him became one of the most urgent missions of the war. U.S. commanders understood that as long as Saddam remained free, he could inspire resistance among his loyal supporters. Already, signs of an emerging insurgency were beginning to appear in parts of Iraq. Roadside bombs exploded along supply routes, snipers attacked patrols, ambushes became more frequent. Some military analysts believed Saddam might still be secretly communicating with loyalists, encouraging them to continue fighting coalition forces. If that were true, capturing him could deal a devastating blow to the growing insurgency. But Saddam Hussein had spent decades preparing for threats to his power. He knew Iraq's geography better than any foreign army. He also had loyal tribal networks in key regions of the country, especially around his hometown of Tikrit. In those rural areas along the Tigris River, support for Saddam remained strong. Family connections, tribal loyalties, and fear of retaliation made many locals unwilling to cooperate with coalition forces. That meant Saddam could be hiding almost anywhere: a farmhouse, a desert village, an underground bunker, or perhaps even closer than anyone imagined. As the weeks passed and Saddam remained missing, the manhunt grew more intense. Special forces units were deployed, intelligence teams interrogated captured officials, surveillance operations expanded across the country. Every clue, every rumor, every intercepted message was analyzed carefully. Some leads turned out to be false. Others pointed investigators towards remote villages and hidden compounds. Slowly, piece by piece, the search began to narrow. Somewhere in Iraq, the former dictator was still alive, and the hunt to capture him had only just begun. What no one knew yet was that the search would lead American soldiers to a quiet patch of farmland near a small town along the Tigris River, a place where one of the most powerful men in the Middle East would eventually be discovered hiding in the most unexpected way, buried beneath the earth itself. And when that moment finally came, the world would witness one of the most dramatic captures in modern history. In the months following the fall of Baghdad in April 2003, the war in Iraq entered a strange and dangerous new phase. The regime of Saddam Hussein had collapsed with surprising speed, but the man who once ruled the country with absolute authority had vanished without a trace. For the United States and its allies, this created a serious problem. As long as Saddam remained free, he was more than just a fugitive, he was a symbol. His supporters could believe that their former leader might return to power, or at the very least continue to inspire resistance against coalition forces. And across Iraq, resistance was beginning to grow. Roadside bombs exploded along highways used by American convoys, snipers fired from rooftops in crowded neighborhoods, nighttime ambushes targeted soldiers patrolling unfamiliar streets. What had started as a rapid military invasion was slowly turning into a long and unpredictable conflict. American commanders believed that capturing Saddam Hussein could deal a powerful psychological blow to those fighting the coalition. But first, they had to find him. To help identify members of Saddam's former government, the U.S. military introduced a unique system that soon became famous among soldiers across Iraq. It was a simple deck of playing cards featuring the most wanted figures from the fallen regime. At the top of the deck was the Ace of Spades. The card showed the face of Saddam Hussein himself. Every soldier knew the image, and every soldier knew the mission: find him. Intelligence teams began building a massive network of information. Captured officials from the ruling Ba'ath Party were interrogated, while surveillance teams tracked the movements of suspected loyalists. Some leads were promising, others led nowhere. Saddam seemed to move constantly, staying one step ahead of the forces searching for him. Meanwhile, coalition forces began focusing their attention on a region known as the Sunni Triangle, a large area north of Baghdad where many of Saddam's most loyal supporters lived. The region included several key cities, including Tikrit, Saddam's hometown. Tikrit was more than just a city, it was the center of Saddam's tribal network. Many powerful families in the area had benefited from his rule, and their loyalty to him ran deep. American forces suspected that if Saddam was hiding anywhere in Iraq, it was likely somewhere near Tikrit. Throughout the summer of 2003, soldiers launched repeated raids in the region. Helicopters thundered over villages at night, convoys of armored vehicles moved along dusty roads, troops surrounded farmhouses and searched buildings one by one. Each raid brought the possibility that Saddam might finally be found, but each time, he slipped away. Some intelligence reports suggested Saddam was using a network of loyal bodyguards and tribal supporters who helped move him between safe houses. He rarely stayed in one location for long. Sometimes he slept in rural farmhouses. Other times he hid in underground shelters built during his years in power. The constant movement made him incredibly difficult to track. But American intelligence officers knew that if they could break his support network, Saddam's hiding places would eventually be revealed. Then, in July 2003, something happened that shocked the remnants of Saddam's inner circle. In the northern city of Mosul, U.S. forces surrounded a large house where two high-ranking targets were believed to be hiding. Inside were Saddam's sons, Uday Hussein and Qusay Hussein. Both men played powerful roles in his father's regime. Uday was known for his violent and unpredictable behavior. As the head of the Iraqi Olympic Committee and several media organizations, he had built a reputation for cruelty and excess. Qusay, on the other hand, was quieter but equally dangerous. He oversaw Iraq's elite security forces and was widely believed to be the man Saddam trusted most. When American troops surrounded the building, a fierce gun battle erupted. The fighting lasted several hours as the two brothers and their bodyguards refused to surrender. Missiles and heavy weapons were eventually used to destroy the building. When the battle ended, both Uday and Qusay were dead. Their deaths were seen as a major victory for coalition forces. For the first time, Saddam Hussein had lost two of the people he trusted most. But even with his sons gone, Saddam himself remained missing. Still, the operation provided valuable intelligence. Documents and information recovered during the raid revealed new details about Saddam's possible movements and contacts. Investigators began noticing a pattern. Several captured loyalists had connections to rural areas south of Tikrit, particularly near a small town along the Tigris River called Adar. Adar was quiet and rural, surrounded by farmland and small villages. It was exactly the kind of place where someone could hide without attracting too much attention. American intelligence officers began monitoring the area closely. Informants were questioned, local movements were tracked, suspicious activity was reported back to commanders. Slowly, the search began to narrow. Meanwhile, the pressure on Saddam's network was increasing. One by one, members of his inner circle were captured. Some of them began providing information during interrogations. Every small detail mattered: a meeting location, a trusted courier, a farm where Saddam had once stayed. Each clue helped investigators build a clearer picture of how the former dictator was surviving and hiding. By late 2003, American commanders believed they were getting closer, very close. Special Forces units began planning a new operation focused specifically on the region near Adar. It would involve hundreds of troops, helicopters, and intelligence teams working together in a coordinated search. The goal was simple: find Saddam Hussein. The mission would soon be given a name that sounded almost like something from a movie, but its objective was deadly serious. It was called Operation Red Dawn, and within weeks, the operation would lead American soldiers to a quiet farm where one of the most powerful men in the Middle East had been hiding in the most unlikely place imaginable. Buried beneath the ground in a cramped hole just large enough for a single man to survive. The hunt for Saddam Hussein was about to reach its dramatic conclusion. By December 2003, the hunt for Saddam Hussein had lasted more than 8 months. Across Iraq, American forces had searched countless houses, farms, and hidden compounds. Soldiers had conducted hundreds of raids, interrogated captured officials, and followed every possible lead. Yet, the former dictator remained free. For many troops on the ground, the mission had become deeply personal. Saddam Hussein was not just another fugitive, he was the face of the regime they had fought to remove. His capture would send a powerful message that his era of power was truly over. And by late 2003, American intelligence officers believed they were finally closing in. Information gathered from captured members of Saddam's inner circle had begun to point toward a specific area near the small town of Ad-Dor, located along the banks of the Tigris River not far from Tikrit. The area was quiet and rural. Small farmhouses dotted the dusty landscape, surrounded by palm trees, irrigation canals, and narrow dirt roads. It was the kind of place where someone could disappear easily, especially with the help of loyal supporters. Intelligence reports suggested Saddam might be hiding somewhere within this region, possibly moving between safe houses protected by tribal allies. American commanders knew they had to move carefully. If Saddam sensed danger, he could disappear again. Plans were quickly drawn up for a new operation designed to surround and search several suspected locations at the same time. The mission would involve hundreds of troops from the 4th Infantry Division, along with Special Operations Forces and intelligence teams. The operation was given a code name inspired by the 1984 film Red Dawn. It was called Operation Red Dawn. The name itself carried symbolic meaning. In the movie, a group of young fighters known as the Wolverines resisted a foreign invasion. For the mission in Iraq, the code names for the 2 primary target sites were taken directly from the film. They would be called Wolverine 1 and Wolverine 2. On the evening of December 13, 2003, American forces began moving into position. The night air was cool as helicopters lifted off from nearby bases, their blades thundering through the darkness. Convoys of armored vehicles rolled quietly along dirt roads, carrying soldiers toward the target area. The operation involved nearly 600 troops. Their objective was simple: search the locations and capture Saddam Hussein if he was there. As the soldiers approached the farmland outside Ad-Dor, they spread out across the area, surrounding buildings and fields to prevent anyone from escaping. The first site, Wolverine 1, was a farmhouse believed to be connected to Saddam's supporters. Troops quickly moved in. They searched the buildings, questioned the people inside, and inspected every corner of the property. But Saddam was not there. For a moment, it seemed like another false lead. Still, the soldiers continued with the mission. The second location, Wolverine 2, was only a short distance away. It appeared to be an ordinary rural property, just another farmhouse surrounded by trees and dirt paths. Nothing about it looked unusual. But intelligence reports had suggested the site might be important. Troops carefully surrounded the area and began searching the buildings. Again, nothing obvious appeared. Then, something caught a soldier's attention. Near the edge of the property, the ground looked slightly disturbed. It was subtle, barely noticeable unless someone looked closely. Curious, the soldier walked toward the spot. At first glance, it appeared to be just another patch of dirt covered with debris. But as he examined it more carefully, he noticed something strange: a piece of foam partially hidden beneath the soil. The soldier called over his teammates. When they pulled away the covering, they discovered a small opening in the ground. It was a narrow hole concealed carefully beneath dirt and brush. The soldiers realized they had found something unexpected, a spider hole. The hole was small, barely large enough for a person to fit inside. A short ladder led down into the darkness below. One of the soldiers aimed a flashlight into the opening. At first, they could only see shadows. Then, suddenly, a face appeared. A bearded man slowly emerged from the underground hiding place. His hair was long and tangled. His beard was thick and untrimmed. Dirt covered his clothing. He looked nothing like the powerful dictator whose portraits once filled the streets of Baghdad. But the soldiers immediately recognized him. It was Saddam Hussein. For a moment, the scene was strangely quiet. After months of searching, the most wanted man in the world was standing before them. Saddam appeared calm, though clearly exhausted. He reportedly told the soldiers, "I am Saddam Hussein, president of Iraq." One of the American soldiers responded with a line that would later become famous, "President Bush sends his regards." Despite carrying a pistol, Saddam made no attempt to fight or escape. The once powerful leader who had ruled Iraq for decades was taken into custody without firing a single shot. Nearby, soldiers searched the area and discovered several items hidden close to the hole. They found 2 AK-47 rifles and a large amount of U.S. currency, reportedly around $750,000 in cash. These supplies suggested Saddam had been preparing to remain in hiding for a long time. But the hiding place itself was incredibly simple. The spider hole measured only about 6 to 8 feet deep, just large enough for a single person to sit or lie down. A small fan provided ventilation, and food supplies had been hidden nearby. For the soldiers who discovered him, the moment was surreal. For months, Saddam Hussein had been the most elusive target in Iraq. Now he was standing in front of them, disheveled and powerless. As helicopters arrived to transport him away, the soldiers realized they had just completed one of the most significant missions of the war. The capture of Saddam Hussein would soon be announced to the world, and when the news finally broke the following day, it would send shockwaves across Iraq and across the globe. In the early hours of December 14, 2003, the news began spreading quietly through military channels across Iraq. After 8 months of searching, the most wanted man in the country had finally been captured. Saddam Hussein, the former president who had ruled Iraq for more than 2 decades, was now a prisoner. The operation, known as Operation Red Dawn, had succeeded. At a military base near Tikrit, Saddam was quickly placed under heavy guard. Soldiers searched him carefully, documenting everything they found. Photographs were taken, fingerprints recorded, and doctors examined him to confirm his identity. Despite his long beard and unkempt appearance, there was no doubt about who he was. The man who had once appeared on giant posters across Iraq had been discovered hiding in a small underground hole in the countryside. For the soldiers who had captured him, the moment felt surreal. Just hours earlier, they had been searching farmland outside Al-Didor. Now they were guarding one of the most powerful leaders the Middle East had ever known. Word of the capture quickly reached American commanders and officials in Washington, D.C. Within hours, preparations began for a public announcement. Later that day, a press conference was held in Baghdad. Standing before reporters and television cameras, Paul Bremer, the head of the Coalition Provisional Authority, delivered the message the world had been waiting to hear. "We got him." The simple statement instantly made headlines across the globe. Television networks interrupted their programming, newspapers rushed to print special editions, governments issued statements reacting to the capture. For many people, the moment symbolized the end of an era. Across Iraq, reactions were mixed but often emotional. In some neighborhoods, crowds poured into the streets to celebrate. Cars honked their horns while people waved flags and fired rifles into the air.
For Iraqis who had suffered under Saddam's rule, the capture felt like the closing of a dark chapter in their country's history. Many remembered the years of fear under the dictatorship, when criticizing the government could lead to imprisonment or worse. Families had lost loved ones during political purges, wars, and brutal crackdowns carried out by Saddam's security forces. To them, seeing the once feared leader captured without power was a powerful moment. Images released by the U.S. military soon spread across television screens worldwide. In one video, Saddam sat quietly while doctors examined him. His long beard was visible as a medical worker inspected his mouth and hair for signs of disease. The images were meant to prove that the man in custody was truly Saddam Hussein. For a leader who had once appeared in carefully staged public appearances, the contrast was dramatic. Gone were the military uniforms and confident speeches. Instead, the former ruler looked tired, disoriented, and powerless. While the capture was a major victory for coalition forces, it did not bring an immediate end to the violence in Iraq. Insurgent attacks continued across the country. Roadside bombs and ambushes remained a daily danger for soldiers and civilians alike. The conflict had evolved into a complicated struggle involving multiple groups with different political and religious goals. Still, the capture of Saddam Hussein carried enormous symbolic importance. For many military leaders, it demonstrated that even the most powerful fugitives could eventually be found. For Iraqis, it marked the final collapse of the regime that had dominated their lives for decades. After his capture, Saddam Hussein was transferred to a secure detention facility where he remained under heavy guard. Plans soon began for one of the most significant legal trials in modern Middle Eastern history. In 2005, Saddam was brought before the Iraqi Special Tribunal to face charges related to crimes committed during his rule. The first case focused on events that had occurred in the town of Dujail in 1982. Following an assassination attempt against him in the town, Saddam had ordered a brutal retaliation. Hundreds of residents were arrested, and many were executed or imprisoned. Prosecutors argued that the crackdown represented a clear example of crimes against humanity. The trial lasted for months and drew worldwide attention. Witnesses described the fear and suffering experienced during Saddam's rule. Documents from the former government were presented as evidence. Throughout the proceedings, Saddam often remained defiant. He challenged the legitimacy of the court and insisted that he was still the rightful president of Iraq. But the evidence against him was overwhelming. On November 5, 2006, the court delivered its verdict. Saddam Hussein was found guilty of crimes against humanity. The sentence was death. In the early morning hours of December 30, 2006, the execution was carried out in Baghdad. The man who had once ruled Iraq with absolute authority was hanged. His death marked the final chapter of one of the most controversial and powerful political careers in modern history. Yet even after his execution, the legacy of Saddam Hussein continued to shape the Middle East. The invasion of Iraq, the collapse of his regime, and the years of conflict that followed would have lasting consequences for the region and the world. For historians and observers, the moment of his capture remained one of the most dramatic scenes of the entire war. After months of searching across a vast country, one of the most powerful dictators of the 20th century had been found hiding in a small underground hole beneath a quiet Iraqi farm. A discovery that brought an end to the manhunt for the Ace of Spades, and a moment that would forever be remembered as one of the most remarkable captures in modern military history.